Walk into a bank with $500 in your checking account and a maxed-out credit card, and you're exactly the kind of customer banks quietly love. Walk into that same bank with $100,000 saved and invested, and something changes. The tone changes. The products they recommend change, the way they treat you changes. Same bank, same economy, sometimes even the same paycheck. Here's what most people don't realize. The bank isn't afraid you'll leave because you're wealthy. It's afraid you'll stop needing them. Let me introduce you to two people. Emily Carter and Rachel Bennett. Both are 38 years old. Both work in healthcare administration. Both earn roughly $82,000 a year. Both drive reliable used vehicles. Both have mortgages. At first glance, their financial lives look almost identical. But there is one difference. Emily has about $4,000 in savings. Rachel has just crossed $100,000 between her savings and investment accounts. And that single difference changes almost everything. Hold on to that. My name is Theo, and I spend far too much time thinking about why some people seem to gain financial freedom faster than others, even when they earn similar incomes. If you're someone who works hard, pays your bills, and sometimes wonders why building wealth feels so much slower than everyone promises, hit like and subscribe if this video helps you see money differently. Because today we're going to talk about a financial threshold that most people underestimate. And once you understand why it matters, you'll never look at your bank account the same way again. A few months ago, Emily's transmission failed. The repair bill came to $3,400. Not catastrophic, not life-changing, just expensive. The problem wasn't the amount. The problem was timing. She didn't have enough cash available. So she used her credit card. The card carried an interest rate slightly above 24%. That meant the repair didn't cost $3,400. It cost $3,400 plus months of interest payments. The repair became a debt. Now watch what happens. A few weeks later, an unexpected medical expense arrived. Another credit card charge. Then holiday spending. Then a few higher utility bills. Nothing dramatic happened. No financial disaster. Just normal life. And that's exactly why it matters. Most financial stress doesn't come from giant emergencies. It comes from ordinary expenses showing up when you don't have enough margin. Rachel experienced something similar. Her roof needed repairs. The estimate came back at nearly $5,000. Annoying, unexpected, expensive. But she paid it. The money left her account. The problem disappeared. No interest, no monthly payment, no financial hangover. Think about that. The actual repair wasn't the difference. The difference was the financial buffer sitting behind the repair. One expense became debt. The other became an inconvenience. This is where behavioral finance becomes fascinating. Most people think money changes what you can buy. But wealth often changes something more important. It changes how you make decisions. Researchers have repeatedly found that financial stress consumes mental bandwidth. When money is tight, people spend more time worrying about immediate problems. Future decisions become harder. Long-term planning becomes harder. Patience becomes harder. That isn't because they're irresponsible. It's because stress changes behavior, and banks understand this better than most people realize. Here's what most people don't realize. Banks make money when they rent money. Every loan, every credit card balance, every line of credit, every overdraft fee. These are products built around borrowing. According to Federal Reserve data, credit card interest rates have remained near record highs in recent years, frequently exceeding 20%. Meanwhile, many traditional savings accounts still pay relatively little compared to what banks earn lending those deposits. Sit with that for a second. A customer borrowing at 22% while earning less than 1% on savings creates a very profitable relationship. The spread between those numbers is enormous. Let's put some numbers on it. Imagine a customer carrying a $10,000 credit card balance at 22%. That customer pays roughly $2,200 per year in interest if the balance remains unchanged. Now imagine another customer with $10,000 sitting in a savings account earning 1%. The bank pays that customer about $100. One customer generates thousands. The other costs money. The math doesn't lie. Banks need borrowers. They need deposits too, of course. But consumer banking has historically generated substantial profits from lending activities. This isn't some conspiracy. It's simply the business model, and that's where the story gets interesting. Because somewhere around the journey toward $100,000, many people begin changing from frequent renters of money into owners of capital. The difference isn't luck. The difference is positioning. Emily still relies on borrowed money whenever life gets expensive. Rachel increasingly relies on her own money. That shift sounds small. It's actually enormous. Let me show you why. Imagine both women lose their jobs tomorrow. Emily has roughly 1 month of expenses saved. Rachel has closer to 2 years. Who negotiates harder during a job search? Who accepts the first offer out of fear? Who has more leverage? Who makes better decisions? Who sleeps better? The answer is obvious. Cash reserves create options. Options create patience. Patience often creates better outcomes. And this is where the $100,000 threshold starts becoming psychologically powerful. Not because there's anything magical about the number itself, but because of what the number represents. A 6-figure financial cushion often means emergencies stop becoming crises. Unexpected expenses stop becoming debt. Financial decisions become less emotional, and that's only the beginning. We'll come back to that. Because another shift happens at the same time, one that most people never notice. For decades, personal finance experts have talked about compound growth. Most people understand the concept intellectually. Few experience it long enough to appreciate how strange it becomes. In the beginning, wealth building feels painfully slow. You save, you invest. You contribute, month after month, year after year. And the account barely seems to move. Then something changes. Let's put some numbers on it. Imagine Rachel reaches $100,000 invested. Let's assume a long-term annual return of 8%. That's not guaranteed. Markets fluctuate. But historically, diversified stock portfolios have often produced returns in that general range over long periods. An 8% return on $100,000 equals $8,000. Think about that. Without adding a single dollar, the portfolio generated $8,000. Now imagine she contributes another $8,000 that year. Her investments contributed as much growth as she did. This is where the game starts changing. The account begins helping itself grow. And as balances increase, the effect becomes more dramatic. At $200,000, an 8% return becomes $16,000. At $500,000, it becomes $40,000. At $1 million, it becomes $80,000. Now watch what happens. At some point, annual investment growth starts exceeding annual contributions. The portfolio starts doing more work than the investor. This is one of the most important moments in wealth building, and many people never reach it because they quit too early, or because debt keeps pulling them backward, or because they never build enough momentum. Hold on to that. Because this explains why the first $100,000 has become almost legendary among investors. Charlie Munger famously referred to the first $100,000 as a major milestone because accumulating it requires overcoming the hardest phase. The phase where contributions matter more than growth. The phase where progress feels invisible. The phase where discipline matters more than results. After that point, compound growth becomes increasingly noticeable. Not overnight. Not magically. But measurably. The difference isn't intelligence. The difference isn't secret information. The difference is staying in the game long enough, and this creates a problem for banks. Not because wealthy customers are bad customers, far from it. Banks value affluent customers. But affluent customers often require fewer high-margin financial products. They overdraft less. They carry fewer expensive revolving balances. They have larger emergency funds. They can self-finance many problems. They become less dependent on borrowing. That's a very different customer relationship. Think about the average financial emergency: a broken transmission, a medical deductible, a temporary job loss, a surprise home repair. For someone with no savings, these events often create debt. For someone with substantial assets, they create paperwork. That's the difference. The event is identical. The outcome is completely different. Behavioral finance researchers often discuss the concept of scarcity. When resources are scarce, people focus intensely on immediate needs. That focus is understandable, but it can make long-term investing harder. Building wealth often requires thinking years ahead. Scarcity forces people to think days ahead. Rachel isn't smarter than Emily. She simply escaped the cycle earlier. And once she crossed that threshold, the advantages started reinforcing themselves. More savings reduced stress. Reduced stress improved decisions. Better decisions created more savings. The cycle reversed. Now let's talk about something even more important. Because the real goal isn't reaching $100,000. The real goal is what happens afterward. Many people mistakenly believe wealth creates happiness because it buys luxury. In reality, wealth often creates freedom because it buys time. Time to leave a bad job. Time to recover from mistakes. Time to care for family members. Time to wait for better opportunities. Time to think clearly. And that's why financial independence is fundamentally different from income. Income is what you earn. Assets are what work for you. Debt rents money from someone else. Assets allow you to own capital yourself. The difference sounds subtle, but it changes everything. Here's what most people don't realize. Banks are not the villain in this story. Banks provide useful services. They facilitate commerce. They provide loans. They support economic activity. The lesson isn't that banks are bad. The lesson is that their incentives are different from yours. Their objective is to profit from financial activity. Your objective is to become financially secure. Those goals overlap sometimes. But not always. A bank benefits when money moves. You benefit when wealth compounds. A bank benefits from lending. You benefit from eventually needing less lending. A bank profits from debt. You profit from ownership. The math doesn't lie. And that's why the journey to $100,000 matters so much. Not because six figures make you rich. Not because your life suddenly transforms. Not because financial problems disappear forever. But because crossing that line often means you've built enough momentum for compounding to become visible. Enough reserves for emergencies to become manageable. Enough confidence to make decisions from patience instead of fear. Let's go back to Emily and Rachel. Same age, same profession, similar income, similar lifestyle, similar opportunities. At the beginning, the difference between them looked surprisingly small. A few $1,000s here. A few $1,000s there. Nothing dramatic. But year after year, those small differences accumulated. Rachel kept building, she kept investing. She kept increasing her margin for error. Eventually she crossed an invisible line. And once she crossed it, compound growth started helping her. Financial stress started shrinking. Options started expanding. The difference isn't luck. The difference isn't talent. The difference isn't income. The difference is persistence. The willingness to keep saving when progress feels slow. The willingness to keep investing when results feel invisible. The willingness to continue through the phase where almost nothing appears to be happening, because one day something does happen. You look up and realize emergencies no longer control your life. Debt no longer dictates every decision. Your investments are beginning to grow faster than your contributions. And for the first time, money starts working harder than you do. That's the real significance of $100,000. Not the number itself, the freedom it represents, the leverage it creates, and the reminder that wealth is rarely built through dramatic breakthroughs. More often, it's built through years of ordinary consistency that eventually become extraordinary results.